Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It has been a very exciting day filled with events here on CAPCON, and I am honored and privileged to introduce our next speaker, Secretary Chuck Hagel. I can think of no one better to inspire us through personal example as we head into the next two CAPCON panels on transitions and the convergence of military and public service. As the first enlisted combat veteran and the only Vietnam veteran to hold this office, Secretary Hagel served as the 24th Secretary of Defense from 2013 to 2015. Among a list of accomplishments a mile long are the major initiatives for service members and their families that he led, including increasing resources for suicide prevention, combating sexual assault, and accounting for missing personnel. During his tenure, Secretary Hagel improved critical partnerships with the Department of Veteran Affairs to include health record interoperability, service treatment record transferability, and continuity of mental health services and support, capitalizing upon his previous experience as the Deputy Administrator of Veterans Administration under President Ronald Reagan. Secretary Hagel also served 2 terms in the United States Senate, representing the state of Nebraska, and along with being a distinguished author, continues to give back. He is the chairman of the HillVets Advisory Board, and we are honored to have his support and lean on his wisdom and guidance. Secretary, over to you.
Danielle, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I know you've had a productive day, and I want to thank each of you for your contributions to our country and all the different ways that you've contributed, and what you're doing now to continue those contributions. And I don't know of a more important time in our recent history than right now to have our best people, people who are committed to leadership, to their country, to doing things for others, righting wrongs, to step forward and offer themselves for leadership to help our country right now. You all know this is a defining time. I don't know of a time in my lifetime, and I was born in 1946. My father came back from World War II, the South Pacific, after serving more than 2 years there in late 1945, and I was my mother and my father were married on Valentine's Day, and I was born 9 months later, and I've checked that. It's true, and I have a birth certificate as well, so I'm all square. But the point being, I've lived that amount of time up to the current, and I do not know a time that has been or is more challenging for this country and the world. I don't know of a time since World War II that's been more volatile, more uncertain than right now. 1968, the year I was in Vietnam with my brother Tom and I, we served together in Vietnam in 1968, the worst year of Vietnam. We sent back over 16,000 dead American soldiers in 1 year. That was a terrible year for this country, not only in Vietnam, but in America. And you all know the history. King and Kennedy were assassinated, cities burned. We had racial injustice issues, a president forced from office. But I think our current time is even more challenging for more reasons, and I think you all understand that. So leadership, people who lead are critically important to get this country turned around and help lead the world back to some stability, to some order. Not that it's going to be the same order. We all know that things never stay the same. Today is gone. Tomorrow will be not like today. It will be new, and so will next year. But that's the story of life, and it's leadership that is always called upon to adapt and to adjust. And the liberal world order that we led in constructing with our allies after World War II has served this world and our country quite well. Imperfect. We haven't solved everything. Yes, we've had wars. still do, injustice, but there's been no World War III, there's been no nuclear exchange, and far more people are far better off today because of the world order that we led and we helped put together over these many years. We adjust all to that and we adapt to the realities of a new kind of world. And that's why I say this is a defining time. It is a very defining time. And this time right now will very much define the future. I mean, I don't know of a more important year when everything has come together. We've got a pandemic that's global, that has affected our economy, that's affected our way of life, the world's way of life. Major economic consequences from that pandemic. We've got a country that's bitterly politically polarized and divided. We've got a presidential election. We've got racial injustice issues, social issues, and all the consequences that flow from all of that. And a world that's pretty unstable. And we've got an election coming up here in just a few weeks that will have an impact, that will start defining not just the next 4 years, but years to come. So I'm telling you nothing that you don't know, but what I'm trying to emphasize is how important this time is and how important you are. And you all have contributed. You've taken a day of your time to be part of this. You believe in things. You've got a North Star. That North Star guides you. I mean, nobody who has ever served in the military doesn't understand that. You swear when you come in to military service, as all of us do in elective office, you swear to the Constitution. You take an oath of office to the Constitution of the United States, to the people of the United States, to this country. It's not to a president. It's not to a political party. It's not to anything else but the Constitution. And as many problems as we've had, and as many problems as we still have something that no other country has and has ever had. And that's the ability, the capacity to self-correct. And that's, again, what leadership is about. We have 27 amendments to the Constitution because we didn't get it all right to begin with. And you know, we all know that minorities, Black Americans had no rights. Women couldn't vote 100 years ago in this country, and on and on and on. So we're working on things. We've got a capacity, a system, a constitution, a nation of laws, our people, how we were brought together as a republic, as a nation, that gives us this great privilege and responsibility to self-correct when we need to self-correct, admit when we need to self-correct. That's leadership. And so I want to get to your questions. I want to get to your thoughts before my time runs out. But let me end this way. First, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts. I've been very privileged in my life to have so many opportunities in so many ways to serve this country. You all are doing and have been doing and will be doing the same things. Well, we do it in different ways, different times, but never give up on that and always follow that North Star and do what's right. And it isn't always easy and it's always compromising, at least in the immediate. But in the end, it always works out the right way. In the end, the truth comes out. In the end, right is right. And that's the best advice I can give to any leader, especially young leaders. Don't get compromised. And if you have to pay a penalty for that, you pay a penalty. But that's, again, that's the price of leadership. When people put you in leadership and they give you that responsibility, they expect you to do the right thing and do it. It's that simple. Sometimes painful, but that simple. So, what do you want to talk about?
Oh, well, I feel a little more inspired now to go out and maybe be positive. 2020 has been a doozy of a year in so many ways, but I really appreciate the history because you're right. For all of the horrors that we are witnessing, it has been much worse. And I love the lessons of adapt and correct course. So there was some hope and inspiration there. That's pretty exciting. We don't have any questions that are flying in. I'd like to pick your brain for hours, and I'm sure people wouldn't want to hear that. I guess I would say this for you. What do you see as your next step being? I know that you've continued to give back in so many ways. Should we expect some new books to come out? Are you willing to come back? Are you going to take a different role? Are you going to continue to inspire all of us young up-and-comers behind you?
Well, thank you. What I'm doing now, and I hope to continue for some years ahead, is help others, help young people, help you all, help young leaders who are going to be charged with awesome responsibilities, bigger responsibilities than I had. And if I can help prepare all of you in a little way based on all the things that I've done and my experiences and the mistakes I've made, then that's really for me as fulfilling as anything I can think of. I don't want another full-time job in government, but of course I'll help if Vice President Biden, who is an old friend, a good friend, and whom I've worked with and been all over the world with for more than 20 years. I mean, if he wants my help, and he knows this, in any capacity, I will do that. But I'm not seeking any office. I don't need that. I really don't want that. But I'll help in any other way I can. I've been involved, I think, as some of your people know, with a lot of universities. University of Nebraska in Omaha, my alma mater. I do a lot with them. University of Chicago. I taught at Georgetown, among other things, after I left the Senate. When I was still serving in government, when I was co-chairman of President Obama's Intelligence Advisory Board for 4 years before I went over to the Pentagon. I did a number of government jobs like that, not full time, but I always connected with a university, with young people. Always through my entire career, I've been involved with young people in organizations and veterans organizations. So I would hope that I would continue to have the health and capacity to continue to do that if people want me to help them, or if I've got something to offer, if people think so, then I'll try to do that.
All right, Betty says we do have a question. She's going to put it up, so I will read it to you. Sir, this comes from John Lira, and he says, service is important, and lately the military is plagued with crime, including murder like at Fort Hood. How can we continue to influence America's youth to serve in the military and national service when they are struggling to connect with the current tone of the country?
Well, that's a very good question, because it sets in context what I was talking about in my earlier remarks, and everything that all of you know. I mean, how much trouble this country is in. And that question is a very, very good one, because it highlights the service component of our society. And that component is critically important to this country. No other country in the world respects service, does service in so many different ways, volunteering to do everything. Not just military service or government service, but all kinds of service. So it's fundamental. It's woven into our fabric as Americans. And your question is, how do we get back to that, and how can we get out of the hole that we're in? And I believe it is a hole. First, we've got to recognize that there has been probably an historic lack of confidence and trust in our institutions. No, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like what we are facing today. People don't trust institutions. It's not just government. It's not just politics. It's not just government political leaders. It's everything. It's across the board. It's the media. It's big business. It's journalism. It's organized education. And that's verified by Gallup's poll that they have been doing for the last 16 years on confidence and trust in institutions. And the military, by the way, is the only institution that rates over 50%. It's been rated around 70 to 75% over the last few years. Only this year was one other institution over 50%, and that was small business. Well, you can understand that. I mean, who's against small business? That's grandma and grandpa and mom and pop and Uncle Joe selling shoes, or Dairy Queen or whatever. But everybody else is down in the teens, the 20s, organized religion, organized education, everybody. And when a society loses confidence in its institutions, we're in trouble, because the leadership of any institution reflects society, and the leadership reflects institutions. Politics just reflects society. I mean, I hear people being upset all the time with political leaders, and I say, well, that was your decision. Those people in power today, we send them to Washington, the president and all of them. And if you want to do something about it, then you better get organized. You better vote. You better put in office who you think would be a better leader. So it's all on the citizen of this country. It's our responsibility. Remember the great quote that Benjamin Franklin had after he walked out of Constitution Hall in Philadelphia, after they had drafted the Constitution. And he was asked, Mr. Franklin, is it finished? Do we have a republic? And he said, we have a republic. We're going to give you a republic. The question is, can you keep it? And boy, was he relevant hundreds of years ago with that question. Can you keep it? It is up to the citizen. We can turn this around, to your question, but it's on us. It's on us. The Russians aren't going to turn it around for us, or the Chinese, or anybody else. It's on us Americans if we want to turn it around. We can do it. I'm betting that we will do it. I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist. I have such faith in this country, in the quality and the goodness of the people. I think most Americans are very fair Americans. We've got the left and the right and so on and so on. But I think most Americans are very decent, fair Americans and citizens. And we've got the system, as I've already said, we've got the process, and we've got the mechanisms to get out of this. I believe we will get out of it, but it's up to us.
So I was going to ask you for a closing thought, but I feel like this is a perfect stopping point before we go too far down the rabbit hole. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being an inspiration to all of us as we've moved through the different HillVets panels today. And of course, you've been, in service your entire life, and we appreciate that. We look forward to our next CAPCON to hear more of your thoughts. And I love that, an optimistic realist. So I'll take that thought away from today, because it's been a rough couple of months. With that, I think we are going to go ahead and close now.
Right.
Thank you for your time, and everybody stay tuned. We are going to hear from Leo Shane at the next panel about optimized responsibility sharing for the transition veteran community.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome back to our next panel. I know it's been a long day of some really good conversation on these issues of transition and veterans integration and whatnot. And we have another panel coming up now that is going to hit those same topics. Got a really diverse group of folks. So appreciate you staying on, and I appreciate your questions a little bit later on for our panelists. We've got John Clark, Staff Director of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity for the House Veterans Affairs Committee, John Boerstler, CEO of Combined Arms, Cheryl Mason, Chairwoman of the Board of Veterans Appeals, and Mike Kirchner, Director of Military Student Services at Purdue University at Fort Wayne. I'm going to bring them on in a minute, but first I wanted to just talk about what we're looking at here. Over at Military Times, we write a lot about the issues of military transitions, military service, how you bring those together, and how you successfully leave the military and come into the civilian community. Real quick, just want to give a shout out to our Veterans Fire team here. Sort of launched right into it, but these are the folks who helped put this together, helped coordinate everything, and did a great job of pulling our experts in. So look, we know that moving from the military to civilian world is not an easy topic, is not an easy task, and it's complicated by, frankly, a lot of the help out there. There are a lot of organizations that want to help. There are a lot of organizations that want to do this, but coordinating that, really getting it to folks is a challenge. How do you work the education pieces in with the employment pieces, with the benefits pieces, with the medical pieces, mental health, all these issues all over the place? Veterans often can be overwhelmed and confused and just taken aback. We've got another slide coming up here in a second. Government Accountability Office has approximately 200,000 service members transition each year. I mean, just think about that number. We're talking about just a huge number of folks who are entering a entirely different world than what they've known in recent years. And again, you're looking at schools, you're looking at employment, you're looking at all of these issues, and how do they handle that? What are the challenges? So, we've heard from various organizations about those struggles, about how do I make my resume? How do I get the right clothes? Who do I talk to? Who do I deal with this? So the panel we've got today is going to help us look at that, and is going to help us, translate what we do there. So I'm gonna throw it now to our panelists, who I believe are all with us. Up there, they are showing up. And just ask them to give a little bit of insight into what their role in this is, and really what they think the best practices are for service members who are getting out. What are the key steps they need to take to start off? So, Cheryl, you were first on my screen to pop up, so you're the lucky one who gets the question thrown to you. Give us a little bit of what the Board of Veterans Appeals does, and just what you see working and what you see not working in a lot of cases.
Well, thanks, Leo. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So I come at this as the spouse of a veteran who has been in transition now for 13 years. And it is a different process for every veteran. So what VA does and what the board does really is we really look across the department at all the pieces, parts that we've got going on. I'm sure you've all heard about the Veterans Experience Office. We work very closely with them throughout the department. Measuring trust, measuring communication, doing surveys. They're in VHA, they're at the board, they're with VBA. So, and VBA has the first couple years of transition. But the other thing that the board does and VA does is we really partner very closely with our veteran service organizations and also the other external partners we have. That's something that we've really seen VA move into the past couple of years, where we're partnering with suicide, with the Prevents program, the Prevents roadmap, with TAPS on suicide, when we're reaching out to communities in small areas to partner there. So we really are trying to approach this as a global process, and we need our partners really to come alongside of us. And as a spouse of someone who has gone through transition from, day one to 13 years. It is a process, and it's something that, I think VA can take the first couple of steps, but then we really need to come together as a community and figure out how we do support those pieces, parts, once we get past the first couple of years. But the most important part is getting the benefits right and getting the services right. And that's really what the board's here to do in case there was, something wasn't correct there. So that's what we do.
13 years, so you only have 13 more years left and the transition will be complete at that point?
I don't think so. No, I don't think the transition is ever complete for a veteran. If you have a veteran who served for 2 years or a veteran who served for 20 or more, the transition just continues to change as that veteran changes. And that's something I know we're going to talk about later, but our veterans are, for the first time since Vietnam, we have more than 50% of our veterans are under the age of 65. And so as we move towards that transition for those younger veterans, it is a different process, and we are looking to approach it very differently.
All right, great. Thanks. John Boerstler, let me throw it to you. Talk about Combined Arms and talk about where you guys fit into this whole picture.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you all, and appreciate you reaching out about Combined Arms. So, really, like Cheryl said, we have to work closely together in order to ensure that these veterans and their families are taken care of, and that they don't fall through the cracks, and that they have the ability to really accelerate their transition from military to civilian life and become our community's greatest assets, like we know they are. And what we do is essentially, as a backbone organization in Texas, is really trying to connect all of the military and veteran serving organizations, be that government or nonprofit agencies, so that they can not only refer to one another, but ensure that they are aware of those organizations and what they do, so that the accountability is there on all sides, and most importantly, so the clients themselves, the veterans and their families, don't fall through the cracks. We do that through a number of different ways, by tracking that veterans in a first interaction. Let's just say if they're checking out of their unit in California or Missouri or Virginia, and they're coming back to Texas as one of the top destination states for transitioning military and their families, that we can really ensure that they have not only access to the employment and the VA benefits and the healthcare resources that they may need, but also the mental health and food assistance and financial assistance. Some of these more high risk or high need social services that we've seen especially pop up during COVID-19 and the global pandemic. And so that these social determinants of health are immediately addressed, so that we can then get them on the path to successful transition. Because ultimately, we all know that the communities it's our responsibility to ensure that they do successfully transition. It's not the installation. It's not where they finish their transition assistance program, because that's where they become displaced workers. And we all know that that's one of the biggest problems that we're all trying to solve for. But we can't do it without partnering with our local VA medical center and all the community-based outpatient clinics. And of course, on the benefit side, it's incredibly important, as well as they're navigating that complex process. And we can't do it without all the community-based nonprofits and the state agencies too. So essentially what we've done is overlay bus maps, or in military speak, intersect fields of fire, however you want to look at it, by allowing those agencies to refer those clients bilaterally to one another. Because we know if the government only provides A, B, and C, and the community-based nonprofits provide D through Z, then we can much more holistically address all of their needs all at once, instead of just continuing to throw information and resources at them and hope that they happen to luck into finding help.
All right, great, thanks. I've got a handful of follow-ups, but we're going to resist that and go to the other panelists first and come back to you in a minute. So, Mike, talk to us about, for a lot of folks, when we talk about transition, education is a natural thought that jumps to mind. So talk to us about your role and what you're seeing.
Sure, and I'll build off Cheryl and John talking about the local communities and the role they play in making a successful transition for veterans. And we look at the number, 45,000 veteran nonprofits, and that's our answer for why there's so many challenges for veterans after transitioning out, is who do I go to and where do I get my answers? And I think at the community level, we can be more intentional and willing to collaborate with agencies that specialize in certain areas and reach out to other organizations that may specialize in areas that are not our specialty. And naturally, one of the areas that a lot of veterans transition into is higher education, creating an opportunity for colleges and universities to serve as that first stop for veterans to receive support, but it certainly shouldn't be the last spot that they stop.
All right, great. And John Clark, John, what's Congress's responsibility in all this?
I have to unmute myself. Sorry.
I got you. I was going to say, this is best I've heard you talk in a while.
I know. It's better if we don't talk, Congress. So I think Congress's role in this, and first is just thank everybody for having me here today. Congress's role in this is to try to improve programs that are existing and try to make connections between the government and the non-for-profit sector and community organizations that are doing great and innovative things. So our first role is to do oversight over the transition itself and seeing the various programs that have happened all the way from when I started doing things 10 years ago to where we are now. And I think TAP has come a long way in that period of time, and the government agencies have jumped in and do different things. But the real connection, I think, right now is to connect with groups like we were talking about earlier, like Combined Arms and others, and then trying to really be that, kind of come in the middle. We'll bring groups together and say, okay, DoD, this is the problem. Can you try to meet the community organizations here and try to be the connection between those groups? We've done that in some roundtables in the past, and we need to do more of it because, while the government agencies do a lot, it's the community organizations that are going to be there when something really becomes a problem. People may not be paying attention to TAP, and we would like them to now, or they don't know about a problem that could come up in 4 or 5 years from now after the transition. It's not about having the solution, the government solution. It's about how do you connect them through Combined Arms or other organizations to assets community that can help solve those problems for them.
So you said you think that the TAP is doing better. These are the transition assistance programs. Talk to me about that, because that has been a point of
Sure.
of frustration and aggravation for a number of years, trying to figure out how to fit that and how to work that in. I mean, are TAP classes now doing a better job bringing those community voices in, or at least putting those issues out there?
The answer is no, of course not. I mean, I think they could be doing a lot more, and that's where we have to start. I mean, TAP is, people have to remember, that wasn't until 2011 that we made TAP mandatory for all departing service members. Before then, it was only the Marine Corps that was doing it. The Army and the Navy and all those other folks was kind of come and go. So they had the pre-separation counseling, which is a very small little piece of TAP, and then it keeps evolving to involve other things like different tracks in terms of education or small business training and those type of things. So, I think we've made improvements on those and trying to individually tailor TAP for the individual over the years. But you're right, the connection between the community organizations is hard. Last Congress, we sat down with groups like Combined Arms and said, how can we try to connect folks to those organizations? And it's hard because DoD can't come in and say, hey, you should go to this organization versus this organization. That's not their role. So it's hard to find those connections. So what we said was, okay, DoD, if you know that someone's going to Houston, then you better give them the name and number of Combined Arms and 5 other organizations that are there to help them. And I think it's going to take some time. Congress can do what we did to put all laws into place, but the services have to implement them. Right now, we're having GAO go out and take a look at all of the latest version that we have of TAP to see if it's doing better. It's hard because COVID has, like everything, thrown a lot of things off recently. So, what our best intentions for TAP were 2 years ago are not what's happening now. It's better than it was, but it's hard to get a good data set for a baseline to be like, hey, is this working? When they really only implemented a lot of these changes in October of last year. And then, so it's hard. It's hard.
Well, you mentioned Combined Arms, so let me throw it to John B here. John, how are they doing? I mean, are you seeing changes? Do you feel like they're at least taking the right steps to bridge that gap? Because as you said, if it's going to ultimately come down to the community, just having those classes and walking away isn't going to solve it. Making those connections is going to be key.
Yeah, that's a great question, Leo. I mean, and John, I mean, on the policy side, I think we're doing a lot. We've made a lot of strides, as he mentioned. The policy development side is different from the policy implementation side, though, as we all know. And each of the installations kind of runs their own TAP program in their own way, and so there's no command and control. There's no standardization, and there's certainly no kind of out of the box information on how to connect that soldier to the community that they're returning to, and to get further upstream in that transition. Because as soon as they step off base, they're untethered. As soon as they step off base, they become a displaced worker. I mean, the way that I think about it in terms of this huge public problem that we have is that we the military create the largest number of displaced workers in the world every year, 200,000 plus people, and that's not even counting their family members, and they're moving from all these different geolocations, and they don't have the professional and personal networks that they had in their unit, and they're returning to these areas, and they're not on par with their civilian counterparts. So how do we get further upstream to connect with them? And I think recently the passage of Senate Bill 785, which thankfully the House and we appreciate y'all's work on that, John and team, really allowed for that validation of the community-based model. And so what that'll do in essence is pilot some of hopefully the largest destinations for transitioning service members, veterans, and their families to show that we can do a great job when we have the ability to reach further upstream and wrap our arms around these individuals, so that we can start that transition process that much early and get them connected to the resources that they need. But right now, I mean, particularly during the pandemic, we have these delayed EAS and ETS moves, which has been great because it keeps folks kind of still within the military and have and be able to provide for their families. But when now they're getting out in September, October, November, and into Q1 of next year, they're coming back to states with really poor job markets. So we're going to need that access to critical social services like financial assistance and food assistance and housing and social connectedness to keep them connected and to keep them networked while they are searching for that next career, while they are searching for that next job. So I think we're at a critical juncture for in the next few years when that policy is implemented and we get it right, and we can validate that truly, if we can make those specific connections between the installation and the communities that we return to, that we can save the taxpayers billions of dollars in unemployment benefit payouts. We can save local governments billions of dollars in all kinds of housing costs and ER visits and you name it. But really, ultimately, if we can narrow down and validate these models, like I mentioned, then I think we can have a better chance at completely reforming the current status quo.
Yeah, I feel like the military displaces 200,000 families a year isn't a great recruiting slogan if you're putting it out that way. But Cheryl and Mike, talk to me about what you guys see in terms of gaps in that transition period and what needs to be done. Cheryl, you're up on my screen, so go ahead.
Great, thanks, Leo. And I think this is a great discussion because coming at it as a family member, as well as seeing this every day with our veterans. So a couple things I did want to mention is VA has the community veterans. I always get the name wrong. Community Veterans Engagement Boards. And we have set up community relationship boards in our communities. The Veterans Experience Office runs those. And all of the leaders in the local area for like VHA, VBA, even cemetery are involved. And I've been to a couple of those. So we are trying to facilitate and connect. And I think that's something that's great that we're doing. We also work very closely with DOL. And a little bit, and DOD, of course. But labor, with their vets program is a very strong relationship, and we do a lot of transitioning there. And then I'm sure that you guys are aware that VBA rolled out the Solid Start program this year, which, we're contacting those veterans within the first year of their transition. And, seeing what they need, seeing how we can serve them, doing things like that. But the other thing that I think that we sometimes, where I see a gap, and I see a gap as a military spouse and now a veteran spouse, where, I'm very focused on military spouse employment because I think it helps us bridge that gap for our veterans. Because if you have a military spouse becoming a veteran spouse who is solidly employed, gives that veteran some space. And that's, the veterans need that space to kind of figure out what's going on, to get their services, to get their benefits, to find out what's going on. So Hiring Our Heroes through Chamber of Commerce has had a very successful program for both veterans and military spouses. And they reach across, of course, they bridge the community with their nonprofits, with the profits, with the government. And so those are great opportunities. But, you know, I think as we transition, especially going forward with this next generation of veterans, you know, we're going to have to get more, you know, much more accessible online, much more virtual, much more services on apps and things like that. And those are areas that we're looking at VA, but you know, we do have to build those community relationships, and we are doing it. I know that, you know, I sit on several activities as a military spouse employment champion, as well as a Prevents ambassador, as well as chairman. And, you know, I'm always looking to facilitate groups to each other. And we look for that with our community groups through, you know, who offers what and how we can connect them. So thanks. So I'll hand it over.
Yeah, I would just say I've actually been impressed with changes to TAP and what's taken place. The Army has been doing their career skills program now for the last several years. And I've started doing research on the outcomes of this program, as well as doing site visits with people that coordinate these programs. And when I think about the biggest challenge veterans face when transitioning out, I think it always goes back to that lost sense of purpose. What am I doing after this? As service members, as soldiers, Marines, we know what our purpose is while serving, but when we reach our last day, it's, well, now what? And I think there's that sense of, I don't know what the next direction is or where I should be going. And no doubt there's even some fear about taking that step, whether it's applying for college, applying for different jobs, because I've never had to do it before. And I think the career skills programs have been very impressive in terms of organizations partnering with the Army, partnering with some of these other branches, and crafting training programs that automatically lead to credentials, certifications, college degrees. And after successfully completing that career skills program, inevitably it guarantees the service member an interview, which often leads to a job offer even before they've transitioned out. So while I'm not going to say TAP is perfect, this is also the only job I can think of that prepares you for your next one while you're still being paid.
Mike, let me keep the focus on you for a minute and just ask about the education specific issue here. I mean, I know over the years we've struggled a little bit with teaching some savviness with picking a college, picking a major, picking things like that. Is the TAP program getting better with that? Are we in a place where, you know, there's always the fear with the value of the post 9/11 GI Bill that it's gonna go to waste, and that it could be either, you know, a predatory school could come in, or just, you know, somebody treats it cavalierly when it's meant to be a real transition tool there. So how are we doing with that aspect of it, and sort of, you know, outlining what the education benefits are, but also what your goals and your targets should be with that approach?
I think the post 9/11 GI Bill has simplified an awful lot of things for veterans as they reach their transition. I think across the military, we're doing a good job of promoting and encouraging service members to take advantage of those education benefits. Several years ago, I was having a conversation with another veteran, and she brought this up. She's like, Mike, this isn't a free education we're getting. This is a benefit that's earned, much like other benefits that are earned related to 401ks, health insurance, vacation. This is a benefit that's earned. And that's why I always encourage veterans to take advantage of the benefits that they've earned. And those are benefits that are going to continue to pay dividends for the rest of their lives. When it comes to those predatory schools, when you're talking about 50% of dollars that are received from the VA going to marketing to find more veterans to attend, that's very problematic. But I think it often goes back to we don't know what we don't know. And so when our battle buddy tells us they're going to University of Phoenix because they accepted all these credits, well, we're often very comfortable with following along without maybe necessarily doing the research to better understand what are the services that school is actually offering. What am I going to be able to do with this certification or degree that I'm going to receive after spending time at this school?
Well, and we could spend several hours on the predatory and and all those questions. But I guess part of what I wanted to get to was that last point of yours, that how do you pick a major? How do you do this? So, we see all students struggle with this, and how is this going to be marketable and stuff. But when you're looking at a service member who's starting education several years behind someone else who may already have a family, may be more dependent on getting that post-military paycheck, that complicates it even more if that benefit isn't used in a way that is really geared towards employment and future success.
Yeah, I look at whether we're transitioning into a job or higher education, there needs to be some type of onboarding process. And when we say onboarding, it's not only about here's your career path, you need to select a major and you need to decide if you're going to be a full-time, part-time. It's also about understanding what are my career outcomes going to be. It's also about learning what is the classroom experience going to be like. At times, no doubt, there's going to be controversial conversations. Students who have strong opinions about the government or about the military or about our time overseas. How do we prepare our veterans for those conversations? How do we prepare them to connect with all of these different points of contact that are going to be brand new? We think about higher education, the professors, the teaching assistants, all of the different resources in student affairs that are available. Who do I go and talk to when making that transition? And then at the same time, the other end of onboarding is socializing the veteran, connecting them with the Veteran Resource Center, connecting with others who look like them and talk like them and have shared experiences that are going to make me feel a part of this campus, this organization, which ultimately is good for the organization, for the campus, because we retain that student.
So you've all mentioned employment and the importance of finding that job and finding that next mission, that next goal in life. I've got a long list of transition job issues here, but I feel like they've all been thrown out the window in the last few months. That the big issue now is the pandemic, and the big issue is how does anybody find a job, and how much of veteran unemployment and veterans transition now is just transitioning to the great unknown that is the American labor force right now. So I wonder if you could each just talk about, what's the next step here? I mean, we've already got these other challenges. How are you thinking of coronavirus? How are you thinking of pandemic and the employment market now, and what do we need to do for veterans to help navigate that? And I'll throw that up as a jump ball for whoever wants to try and grab it first.
I'll jump in on that first. I think one of the big things that concerns me is looking at the veteran unemployment numbers is the bulk of the veteran employment population is older, and they are between the age 35 and 60. These are folks that, not everybody, most of them have used their post 9/11 or GI Bill benefits have expired. And how do we get those folks into training for jobs that are going to be ready for the next century? There's a lot of jobs that are available in this country right now. People just don't have the training for them. So one of the things that my boss, Dr. Rowe, has proposed, and we've passed out of the House and working it through the Senate, is to reauthorize a training program to have people do short-term training for in-demand occupations. And I think that is where we need to be focusing our efforts right now. I have a policy analysis degree, which is great, but that's not going to do me anything other than probably this job and a couple other here in DC. If I had to go out and find, retraining for something for an in-demand occupation, I would be out of luck. So I think having and giving people that opportunity to go and do those type of things is great. And, if we can get people into jobs, that gets us out of the unemployment conversation, and helps with the suicide issues and helps so many other things can be addressed if someone has a good paying job that they feel that self of worth and part of it. So I think that's a big part of it. COVID has thrown everything else off in terms of services that VA provides, that vets provides. They're doing what they can virtually, but in some ways I think it's helpful because for a long time we've focused a lot of our employment services on face-to-face content. You go to the employment office, you talk with someone face-to-face. That's not how people this generation get jobs. They're going to do things like this, they're going to do LinkedIn, they're going to do all these other type of things. So I think it's good that it's forcing government in a way to look at innovative approaches to just about everywhere, including how we provide services to people over the internet.
So I want to jump into here. So I think, one of the challenges that I see for veterans is 1% of our veterans of this nation serve. So that means 99% haven't. And so the challenge is getting those employers who haven't and don't know what talented veterans they have out there, and figuring out how we put them together. But I agree. One of the things we've worked on at VA, and we changed the name of the organization, it's now Veteran Readiness and Employment. And we're really focused on doing just that, trying to train where we can. But I agree that transition period, because we have older veterans who need different skills, and COVID has shown us that the virtual skill set is really important. I will tell you, one of the things VA has done all along is we're hiring left and right, but we're trying to work with OPM and change those hiring skills, and hiring focuses. But we still need certain skills for people to do the job, and so there is some on-the-job training that we can offer. But how do we get those employers out there, the 99% who don't know who veterans are? How do we get them to realize what a great asset these veterans are? And that's an area that I really think that we need to figure out a better way to market our veterans.
I would just build off that. I think that's a role for higher education to take on and do a better job of not only educating veterans, but also educating employers about different branches of service, different MOSs, and how do we evaluate candidates when they submit a resume that may be incomplete or may not at first glance look like the candidate has all of those KSAOs that we've decided are important for the job that they've applied for. But at the same time, I think we all can do a better job of educating veterans on how to play the game. And I'm a competitive person. I look at life as a game, and those who know how to play the game are going to be successful. We know that employers are using screening systems to filter out applications that don't have the different trigger words, that don't have these KSAOs, don't have these other attributes included. And so if a veteran doesn't know how to play the game, it doesn't matter how much training or experience they have if they can't get through that system.
John Boerstler, let me throw this to you, because that issue, and specifically that resume issue, I've been writing about for 10 years. This has been a recurring thing. Are we getting better at that? There was a point where there was a real concern that employers and that community groups just wouldn't want to work with veterans, wouldn't know how, and would see it as some sort of problem, concerns about stereotypes and all this other stuff. I mean, I get the impression now that the desire is there, that there have been improvements, but it's always going to be an evolving process to fit them. But am I right there? I mean, are you seeing a desire among employers, among groups, among communities to take on that role, and just some uncertainty how to do it?
Yeah, I think it's really still just a disconnect on their understanding of what skills and experience we bring to the fight, what we bring to their business every day. But we still we get contacted every day by new employers that want to work in Texas to help build a better pipeline from military service into their industries, whether that's heavy industry or tech or manufacturing or services. I mean, everybody wants to hire more veterans. They just don't know how, and they don't know what they're looking at. If they're looking at a resume that smells like combat boots, if they literally come with one that's coming straight out of the Soldier for Life program, they're going to need some help in networking and mentoring. So I think there's the problem isn't really that, like the pipe that side of the pipeline. The problem is really ensuring that veterans are not only better equipped to market themselves more efficiently, so they understand that they're more qualified for a job at Schlumberger in the oil field than they are for Best Buy. But the problem is that they know Best Buy because it's a retail-facing organization, and they'll get a job there. Not that there's anything wrong with working in a Best Buy, but though they should be making a lot more money working in a highly technical field. So it's really our role at the community level, as you mentioned, Leo, to connect those dots and to paint a better picture of what veterans are and who veterans are as it relates to business, in terms of what the retention rates and the impact and the cultural cultural malleability of veterans. We still have a ton of veteran resource groups, and one of the best ways that we engage with the greater community and the corporate community is by bringing together all of our veteran resource groups regionally on a monthly call. And we bring together speakers on diversity and inclusion, or, how to build a better veteran hiring program. But these are our advocates within those big companies who have made that successful transition from military to civilian life. So engaging them and activating them to set the standard and to spread the word within their companies is just as much of an important tactic for us to employ as well. So there's a lot of different things that we need to do, and I'm glad we're talking about employment, but the other social services that veterans need, and whether that's access to VA healthcare or VA benefits, or like I said, financial and food assistance, we've never seen them at such a high, those critically needed social services at such a high demand rate, even though employment's still number one, but we can't ignore those other social services that they need in order to be the great employees that we know that they can be once they get the job.
Just want to do a quick pause here to remind folks that if you have a question for our panel, please submit it and I'll throw it at them. If not, I am happy to keep beating up folks on the panel for as long as you'll let me. Cheryl, you mentioned the Solid Start program, and based off what John just said about the need for those other services, can you talk a little bit about that and what the reception has been? Because I know there were some concerns about, if VA is being too proactive, is that going to end up pushing folks away? So explain the program, and then just talk a little bit about how it's gone so far.
Sure. So it's primarily run out of Veterans Benefits Administration. So that's kind of not my area, but I can talk about it because it's all things VA. So Solid Start was a program that VBA started to really reach out to our veterans within the first year of separation, whether it's retirement or whatever. And so we can reach out, check in, see how they're doing, see what they need, if they need benefits, if they need to apply for benefits, things like that. Check in to see if we need to get them into mental health programs, or just into VHA, and education primarily. The Veterans Readiness and Employment team was leading that as well. So initially, I think it was a little bumpy because it was new, it was different, and people really didn't expect VA to kind of reach out and be proactive like that. They hadn't seen it before. We're changing a few things at VA these days, and so this was one of the areas that I think it has been successful. VBA has really been reaching out through the VSOs and through other groups in the area to really try to connect with those veterans where they can't reach out to them. And so I think it has been successful. I think that we really would like to see more community involvement there where we could. I think that's, like I said, VA handles the first year or so of transition. As we talked about, that goes on from there. And transition is not, I just want to point this out. It's not just the veterans that's transitioning; it's the family as well, and that is a challenge for our veterans. And so that's where the community groups come in. So it has become more successful as we've gone on with it. It's actually, I think, through the virtual environment, has gotten a lot more I think, easier because veterans, the veterans we're reaching out to are more comfortable in the virtual environment for the most part than some of our older veterans. So that's what I can tell you about that. We're really excited to see the changes there, and we've been working really closely with our community veterans employment engagement boards to connect those veterans to services like in Texas and those areas. So.
And you again, you mentioned the family issue. I think we've all talked about that a little bit. Is that when we're talking about these transition issues, is that an issue that is brought up in TAP? Is that an issue that is brought up in these, or is that often sort of pushed to the side and not thought about until it becomes a critical problem?
I'm going to let John talk to more about that. I mean, it is if there's a caregiver situation, but I don't know that we're trying to address it more. But I saw John raising his hand, so I'm going to let him take that one.
Oh no, that was just that's a scrap.
No, you're on the hook now, though.
Yeah, no problem. So we're very inclusive in how we define who we serve as clients, because there are a ton of organizations that provide services for family members. So you can actually sign up for services as a family member, be that a caregiver or not, or as a spouse or partner, and then access different services that are provided just for you as that family member. And we always know that sometimes the family members and the spouses in particular are the biggest advocates for that transition process. So we allow them to come, or we actually encourage them and market to them directly, saying, if your spouse is still on active duty and busy with readiness and or currently deployed, here's the check-in form that you can fill out on their behalf, and then start accessing services before y'all PCS. So there's a lot of innovative ways that we're looking at in terms of designing different marketing, geofencing tactics, et cetera. But the main thing is that we gather all the organizations that serve families, that serve caregivers, including VA and including non-governmental organizations, and we bring them together on a monthly basis to speak in the collaboration committees. And there they bring the best practices, they share data, they share clients, and they talk about their SMART goals that they set year in and year out to achieve greater numbers of clients or to reach greater numbers of clients by connecting them into the services that we know that they so greatly need.
All right, great. I think we have an audience question coming up here for John Clark. Yes, from Tanya. John, here's the question. Veterans looking to get their helicopter pilot's license. Does the new reemployment program cover that?
It's a great question, and if it would be approved for a GI Bill benefit and it's an in-demand occupation, which I think it is, I don't know if the airlines would agree with that right now, but by and large, yes, it should be qualified for that reemployment program that we're hoping to get through here by the end of the year.
Well, and I actually had a follow-up question on that. What can we expect by the end of the year from the committee? Because I know there are quite a few things. I know there's codifying the Solid Start program that we just talked about, the employment skills program that you talked about that Dr. Rowe has introduced. I mean, it seems like a lot of these are pretty non-controversial, but nothing on the Hill is non-controversial these days. Are you expecting that a lot of these can become law in some of the lame duck sessions here, or some of the bonus Supreme Court sessions that we're going to have over in the Senate?
Right. Well, that's a great question, Leo. So this is where I get to say that I am the least powerful of the four corners in the House minority. So I do not control the schedule on either the House nor the Senate. But no, I think we're hopeful. We've had a lot of really good advances, like you talked about. HR 7105 that passed the House last week. That had a bunch of homeless provisions and a bunch of employment provisions specifically related to COVID. I know the Senate has a companion. We're hoping to work that out. So there's some staff level discussions now. We're hopeful to get that. A bunch of the other issues related to benefits, the Protect the GI Bill Act that the House passed earlier this year to try to address some of the low quality schools that were discussed earlier. So there's a lot of things that are out there. I think the end of the year is always hard. And I know that, we were really pleased to get S785 through, as mentioned earlier. That's on its way to the president's desk right now. But no, I mean, we're always hopeful, especially in the lame duck, to get things through. And yeah, it's not controversial. It's more about just getting the timing right and figuring out the bigger politics of the day and kind of how we fit in there. I think COVID too has also thrown a lot of things off. It takes the House a lot longer to vote on something than it did pre-COVID. So there's a lot of backed up stuff, even in the House and in the Senate in the same way too. So, I'm a glass half full person. So yeah, I'm hopeful we can get a lot of those things through, especially the employment stuff and things that need to happen right now.
Well, it should be a pretty quiet November and December, so I don't see any potential problems coming up there. Look, wanted to jump back on something that I forget which one of you said it, but real quick, that idea of the lost sense of purpose. That's not as easy as finding a job. That's not as easy as deciding what school to go to. How do you work on that? How do you, is there a way to codify that? Is there a way to approach that is more, or am I thinking about that concept the wrong way? Because that really is a key thing. It's not just finding a job. It's not just figuring out where you're going to live. It's figuring out what your place in the community is going to be. It's those volunteer opportunities or that public service. So I'm wondering if any of you have any thoughts about how to tackle that. Are there things that you're seeing that are working right now?
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned social connectedness, and I'll just mention this briefly earlier, and that we constantly see like our all-time metrics. It's employment and then social connectedness, like those types of activities are what people want to be connected with. And then number 5 is like volunteer engagement. So what the veterans are telling us is that they want to make an economic impact on the communities they're returning to. Number 1, yes, they need to get at that job so they can provide for their families. But number 2, they want to be reconnected with their tribe. They want to have that unit mentality and also get involved in civic organizations. So luckily, we have a lot of organizations in our portfolio and in our ecosystem that provide a lot of those opportunities to build that personal and the professional network at the same time, so you can get more involved in your community, you can get more active, you can get more engaged. And I think that leads, as you're alluding to, Leo, is that they lead to better outcomes in general for the veteran and their family.
I'm going to jump in here too, because I think that is so important. And I think it's really, having lived through that a little bit, that impact and that sense of purpose is really, really important for our veterans, making sure that they feel that they can really make a difference and make that impact. And I think that's something that we talk about at VA all the time. I can tell you that. I mean, one, you have a lot of veterans around, so we talk about that. We're serving a lot of veterans, but understanding. And so I really am thrilled to hear them talk about that with Combined Arms, because I see it somewhat in some of the non-government organizations I work with, but I really get concerned about that when speaking with our friends who are veterans. We had one friend who changed jobs 3 times, and that's normal for our veterans who separate 3 times in 18 months. But he literally left the defense world and went to private sector and is very, very happy there. But it took a minute for him to find his way, and how do we support that? And that's really important. And so I don't know, again, I'm going to say military families have to be involved there, because that's something that all of the family members need to support the veteran, but the military families want to be involved as well.
I think if we look at...
No, go ahead.
I think if we look at that number of 45,000 veteran nonprofits, that stands out as what percentage of those 45,000 are run or have been started by veterans. I'm going to guess an overwhelming majority of them have been started by veterans who have identified this new sense of purpose while continuing to serve their communities. And we also know that veterans are more likely, depending on the research, you see 2 and 3, even more times likely than a civilian to start their own business. What a new sense of purpose looks like doesn't necessarily mean military service. And I think this is where organizations and employers can do a better job of being intentional in how can you serve our organization and community with whatever this new job is you're moving into. I don't think we do, as a country, do as great of a job in helping our employees understand the big picture and how they're contributing to their team and to their organization and community, specifically with the work that they do.
All right, great. I think we've got time for one more question from the audience, and here it is. From Tom, since most transitioning veterans are enlisted personnel, how do we change the subordinate mindset after enrolling and graduating from higher education institutions? Who wants to dive on that one?
I think it's a acceptance that just because everyone says they're military friendly, it doesn't really guarantee us anything. I think there's a little bit of reflection and a reality check we need to take upon transitioning out and accepting, while we have some great experiences and while we're generally viewed favorably in the public, it doesn't guarantee us or give us anything, and maybe just embrace this new role of being a student in higher education.
I think, one of the things I think in answering that question is, again, I think our veterans sometimes sell themselves short. When you're enlisted and you go and graduate in a higher education institution, you're bringing all your experiences from your service as well as your education. And so what I found with the veterans that I work with and have hired, as well as my military spouses, that's a really great talent pool. And so I think it's also we have to help them build their confidence and encourage them to step up, because they have the talent and the gifts to do this. And I think it's a situation of investing in them and encouraging them.
Yeah, I think the metric that you mentioned earlier was that veterans are much more likely to start their own businesses than their civilian counterparts, right? I think most of those folks being enlisted makes us scrappier, right? And so I'm a Marine sergeant, and a lot of folks think that I was an officer when I was in the Marine Corps, and I was not. There are just as many officers that work on our team in frontline roles as there are NCOs that work on our team. And then, we have officers and enlisted folks on our board too. Once you get to the civilian world, it's really about normalizing and understanding your value and being able to maximize your value no matter what rank you were, because some of us just had a different experience. Some of us had just different circumstances when we entered the military, and some of us just wanted a different pathway for our lives. So I think better educating the folks on all the successes and the scrappy success stories, I guess, if we want to call them that, and how we got from A to Z is really what I think what we need to continue to do.
All right, great. Well, let me throw it to all of you for one last closing statement here. If we've got you've got all these folks listening, what should they be looking at? What should they be thinking about when they're thinking about transition now and making it their goal ahead? So, John, Clark, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Let me throw it to you first.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to thank HillVets and everybody, and Leo and everybody, for the great conversation today. I think the big thing for me is that we need your feedback when it comes to transition, when it comes to TAP and how to make things work better. It's very hard for me sitting in my office or now my house to try to figure out ways to improve TAP, especially when I can't get out and travel and visit things ourselves or look at transition. So the more feedback that you can give to either Congress or your member of Congress on what you think needs to happen helps us in so many ways. So that's my plea. Give us a call. You have a problem, you see something that needs help, or you're having issues with the government agency. It sounds silly, but we're from the government. We're here to help, and we want to learn what is working, what isn't working, and so we can make it better. So thank you again for having me. This has been great.
Cheryl, how about you?
My piece of advice is just to remember that a transition is not a PCS. It's a much bigger deal than that. And so, approach it like that. Approach it as the next journey of your life, and invest in it, because it really can be amazing. But it is an investment, and it does take time to think about it. And while you might change jobs, it's okay. You're looking for the right one, but it is not a PCS, and don't treat it like one.
John?
Yeah, well, well, first of all, thank you guys for hosting us and for inviting me to participate. I'd much rather be doing this in person in DC over a beer, or at least have a beer afterwards. So next time we can have these conversations, hopefully in person, when all this madness is over. But the mantra behind Combined Arms is really no one unit can accomplish the mission on its own. So if you guys are out there and you're hooking and jabbing in communities across the country or internationally even, and you have improvements, you have ideas on how to solve for these complex public and private problems, reach out to us, because we're always looking to improve our process and if we're truly putting the client, the veteran, and the family at the center of everything, if we're truly trying to understand and hold the agencies that serve them accountable, then we need your help. We need your help to accomplish that. So my advice is to seek us out as well and help us improve that process with the government and the nonprofits that we represent as our great partners.
John, I'm sorry, you were supposed to be drinking through this whole panel. We didn't make that clear at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I'm just advising it in my HubSpot branded mug here. So,
Mike, your final thoughts.
I say this fairly often, but I don't think there's ever been a better time in history to be a veteran in this country. With the amount of support available, the amount of resources that are invested in veterans in their transition and long after transitioning out, it's pretty impressive. But we still have many challenges on the civilian side, and even understanding what it means to be a veteran and how can we help. The word military friendly or term military friendly is thrown around all the time, but when we ask organizations to define, well, what does that mean to you? That's where we struggle in what does it mean to be military friendly? And we all have a role in helping redefine and helping us all better understand how can we best support veterans.
Well, great. Thank you to all four of you for your stuff. Thank you to HillVets for inviting all of us on to have this conversation. I think it was a great conversation. Thank you to the audience for your patience as I descended into darkness, as all my natural light disappeared over the course of this panel. Still a couple more panels and a couple more speakers, so go get a quick bite to eat and then come right back. There's going to be some more conversation to be